Okay, so good evening everyone. Thank you for joining me. Let me just go to the screen. Okay, so my name is Susan Pine and I'm a Senior Access Developer with IT Impact in Chicago. I'm also a chapter coordinator for the Access User Groups. If you've not had a chance to look at our websites, there are several groups that we have ongoing. And I have just recently done this chapter for beginners. Last month I did go through the general overview of Access and describing each of the objects, the different types of objects that we have in Access, tables, queries, etc., the ribbon bar. So if you've not had a chance to look at that, you may want to go over that video. And today, what I'm going to talk to you about is creating tables. So before you start to code, you really need to spend some time planning your database structure, have a clear understanding of the functionality of the final product, but also the data you want to store, the table structure and data types for each column. So I would take a pen and paper or use a Word document and just make a list of the fields and what you want to have in your database. Give it plenty of thought because it's a lot easier to make the changes now rather than afterwards once you've started creating your database. Okay, so for your first thing, the field names, it's better if you don't use spaces in your field names. Some people might use an underscore instead of a space, but what I prefer to do is just capitalize each word to make it easier to read. As you see here, here's an example of some table structures. Then the data types. The short data type is a popular choice since it lets you enter almost any character, letter, symbol or number. However, it's with careful selection of data types, you can help you to take advantage of more Access features such as data validation and functions and improve the accuracy of the information you're storing. So let's have a look at some of the data types. It's a chart that we have that shows all the different data types and what you would use them for and the size. So as I said, the short text is the most popular. The only thing there is it has a limit of 255 characters. So if you've got a field that's like a memo or notes field, you would want to use the long text field data type so that you can store in more information. We then have the number field, which is for numeric values only. The date and time, which can store date only or date with time. The currency, which is for monetary values, and although we tend to use 2 decimal places in general for currency, Access does allow you to use up to 4 decimal places. Then there's the auto number. Now this is generally used as the primary key and holds the numeric value which starts from 1 and increases by 1 for each new record of data. The next is the boolean, which actually registers a true or false value. Most commonly so you can say have it showing yes, no, or true and false. Now in Access, it's 0 is the value for false and -1 the value for true. And we have the OLE object, which allows you to upload other objects to Access, pictures, graphs, or ActiveX objects. Hyperlink, hyperlink, this allows you to enter email addresses or website addresses, and it allows the users to click on those and launch either the website in a browser or launch your Outlook and create an email with that for that email address that they selected. Attachments, this is for pictures, documents, can be PDFs, emails, anything that you want to link with your in your database. Store the information there. Calculated fields allows you to create an expression, and it's a field that works itself out based on the criteria that you set for the calculation, and you do not actually enter data in that field. So say for example, if you have a sales table and you have a product that the select, so it's a product, the number of the product, say the quantity and the individual price, and then you may want to calculate the total based on those, on that information. And then finally the Lookup Wizard. We will go into a bit more detail of this shortly, but it easily allows you to make a choice of the data that goes into there by providing a list of the options available. The next thing you need to think about are your primary keys. Now Access uses primary keys, key fields, to quickly associate data from multiple tables and combine that data in a meaningful way with a unique reference, and it's easier for Access to sort and search for data by the numeric value as opposed to using a string. So in this example here, we're using the company ID in the orders table rather than storing the company name. And when creating a table in Access, if you forget to add a primary key, Access will prompt you to add one. It's important to include the primary key on all tables. In general, this would be the auto key, but if you have a field that would use a unique value, such as a product number, then you can use your own defined field. You can include the primary, as I mentioned, you can include the primary key in other tables to refer back to the table, and this is then known as the foreign key, as I mentioned here. So let's go into a demo and start creating a table. So launch Access. Leave name for one. Okay, so once I've launched, here we are, and this is the first table that's opened. And we're going to put this in design view. Sorry, database sheet, design view, there we go. And it's going to prompt me for a name for this table. This is going to be TBL clients. Okay. And we start by just typing in the field names. This is the ID, but I don't want to leave it as ID. I'm going to put client ID, and then I know that this ID has come from the client table. And that will stay as an auto number. We'll have the client name. Next. Address. And this will be a short text. Just going to do a few fields now for the demo. Let's put some different data types. Let's put it's added. And this field is just for me for tracking of the customers to see when they were added into the system. client inactive, so that if a client business is closed or is no longer doing business with us, rather than deleting him from the database, we just simply make him inactive. So that one I'm going to use a Boolean field. The reason we'd make him inactive rather than actually deleting the record is because we may have sales or use another table that's using their primary key as a foreign key, and we don't want to lose that information. We want to keep up information of the past sales for historical information. And then finally, client notes. Okay, we'll just leave that as, oh, sorry, that's the long text. I'll save that. It's that table. And we're going to create another table. Going to design view. And this time we're going to do the sales table. You see, this time there's no prompt for the primary key. That was just in the initial launch of the new database that it does that. So here we have to enter this ourselves. So we'll enter sales ID. This is the auto number. And then to make this a primary key, you just come over to the left here. And I'm going to right click and select primary key. And then add my other fields, which is a sales client. As I said, that's going to be a numeric field. We're going to log the ID there. The sales date. Date time. Value. This is going to be a currency field. And we'll have a sales rep. Again, numeric value. And notes. This is TBL sales. Great, so now we have two tables and we can see them here in the navigation pane. These other tables that are hidden here, these are system tables. So if I come up to the top here and right click and go into the navigation options, if I uncheck here the show hidden objects and show system objects, say OK. Now I'm just seeing the objects that I'm creating here. You don't really need to see those hidden objects at this time. We'll go into those later on, further on in advanced. But for now, we just have these two tables that we've created. What I want to go over now is the properties for the different data types. So if we look here, and you'll see here at the bottom of the screen, we have the properties that apply to each field data type. And as you can see, some data types have more options than others. We don't actually have a text, the text one here. Let's open the client table as well in design view. We can look at the options here. Okay, so one of the property types that they all have in common is the caption. And this is the label name for the field in datasheet view. If this is blank, the label will just take the name of the field name that we have typed in. But as I mentioned, the words are all pushed up, no spaces, so it's a bit harder to read. So if we put that in datasheet view here, just by clicking here at the bottom of the right hand corner, you have the two toggle buttons. So here in datasheet view, as you can see, The labels are just as I typed them, but that's not very user friendly, so let's make some changes there. Okay, so we're here on the client name and we come down here to the caption and change this to customer. Oops. As well, for the address, we can just simply say one. Press 2, down, zip. Okay, so if I save that now, put that in design view, and you'll see now that the labels have changed. So that's what the caption does for you. Let's look at some other of the properties. Okay, the next one we have is the default value. And this allows you to set a default value for a specific field where you have common entries. So for example, the country, if all of your clients are in the US, or the majority of them, you don't want to have to type that each time. So if we come down to country and go into the default value, just type United States. Okay, you see it's put the quote marks around there because it is a string value. And if we go into the datasheet view again, you'll see now it's auto-populated with the default value. You can obviously type over that and put some other information in if it changes, but it's just to help with speed. Another field which would be good to have a default value is the date added. And so that wants to be when the date when the record was created. So the function we're going to use there for date added is now. Let's see. Value is now. There are two. It's now and then with open and close parenthesis. There's now and there is a date. Now will show both date and time, whereas date would only show the date. So show you this now in datasheet view. Expand this window and you'll see it's stored the current date and the time as set from my computer. If we'd have used date, then it would just return this area. Okay, so then that saves users when they're entering information, they don't have to put in that date added, it will be automatically added for them. The other one which is already preset is the Boolean field, which is defaulted to no. Yes, no field. And here the default value is no. If you need to change that at all, you can, I won't click on that, you can just simply type in yes here. In this case, it wants to be no. That as it is. Okay. So that's the default values. Then we have the required field. It's not shown on this one. On the short text you'll see it. And the required field is just to say whether this field value can be null, meaning there's no data in there, or do you want to force users to actually input information all the time in that field? So say in the case of the client name, you always want to make sure they've got a name in there for the client. So just on this required, if we just double click in there, and that changes from no to yes. Now when I hit save, if there's any data in your field, it will prompt you with a message asking that that it will check the system. Let's see if we can do that on one for us. Okay, so if I need to put some data in, so let's go in here. Let me show you an example now. We've got some information. If we go back to design view, if we want to make the town required field, we'll change that to yes. And now when I click save, it's telling us, that we've added this rule that the town field has to have some data. And it's saying existing data may not be valid for the new rules, and that it's going to run through a process to validate that information. So we'll say yes, this won't take long because there's hardly any records there, and it's just checked it and validated that that field has some data. So say if we went to pick on client address 2 where there's no data in, and I make that a required, now I'll say check it, and it's telling me now this is saying no, you can't make this a required field, you've got some data there that is blank. So what you'd have to do is update those records first, make sure they've got data in before you can actually add this required field. That's where you've got data already in your table. If it's a new table and you've no data in, it's not a problem. So I'm going to say no to stop testing, and you'll see it's changed that back to no. So that's the required field. We then have the text align, which is just a standard one saying how you want the data to be shown, the alignment, left, right, center. And we'll have a look at formatting. Now on this one, I believe we had a phone number. Can I put a phone number? No, I didn't. Let's add one. And that would be short text. But we want to make sure that they're putting this in properly valid as a phone number. What we could do is come here to the format. Sorry, the input mask, not a format. Format is what we want, input mask. Okay, so let's save the table. So now we've got the input masks. And these are useful. An input mask is a string of characters that indicates the format of valid input values. You can use input mask in table fields, queries, and controls on forms and reports. And the input mask is stored as an object property. So in this case, we're entering a phone number and we want it to have a set format. So I'm going to select this one, that's the phone number. Say next. And here, these are the values for setting the input mask. Now let me just bring up this other sheet from the presentation, which is this one for the input masks. And it shows you what characters you can use to present in an input mask. And you may recall here we had the 9s and the 0s where the numbers would be. And what they represent is Where there is a 0, you must enter a digit, and where there is a 9, it is an option to enter it. So you don't have to enter that one, but the others you must. I'm seeing odd. I would make these, if you always want to have those values in your phone, if you make those all 0, it makes it so that the users always have to enter the full digits for the phone number. I'll say yes. Now, how do you want to store the data? Do you want it to actually be stored in the data table with the symbols, or just the numeric value? Sorry. It will show in the field to the users, it will show as this, but I'm going to actually store the data just as a numeric value. I'll say finish there. That is done. Save that. And now if I go into design view and I come now here to the phone number, and you'll see we have the mask to input the information. So again, that just looks a bit tidier than if you were to input a phone number just with the numeric values, or you may have it then where if you don't use an input mask, that some users will enter a phone number one way and others would do maybe just the lines or no dashes, and it just keeps it uniform, your data. Now, when to avoid using input masks in Access. As useful as they are, input masks are not appropriate in every situation, and don't use an input mask if the following circumstances apply to you. Firstly, people occasionally need to enter data that doesn't match the mask, and an input mask does not allow exceptions. So say for example, I'm using this input mask, and remember I put zeros, that all the numeric values had to be entered. If I come here now and I put just these values in, I try click out, I've missed entering this data here in the bracket, parenthesis, and there we get this message coming up. The data entered is not valid, so it won't allow me to leave that field. We can just delete. It won't allow me to input half the information. I've got to have it all or nothing. The other thing with an input mask is if you use an input mask for a date field, it doesn't allow you to use the date picker. That was the date picker here that we see. It brings up the calendar that allows you to easily step through the months and dates to select a date. So if you had an input mask for a date field, you would not get that date picker. Okay, so what have we got left on the property fields? The validation rules. And a validation rule allows you to restrict data input by using a rule to verify that the data a user enters in a record meets the standards. It can contain a formula or an expression that evaluates the data, or just basically check if it's true or false what you've entered. So how can I show you a validation rule? Okay, so for example, the zip code. If we want the zip code always to make sure it's got at least 5 numeric values, our validation rule here would be length is not do that. Length, and it wants to have the field in. Client zip. Set. Length. The client zip is greater than 5. So let's say this. It's okay. So now if I come to the zip, and I only put in 3 digits, it didn't like that. What did I do wrong? I know why. My formula was wrong. It's the field. Yep. Okay. That's working because we got the existing validation rule. Just make sure that it saved my changes. Yeah. Okay. And now if I try type in 3 values, it's telling me here, no, the validation rule is it can't be, it has to be greater than 5. So actually I've done that wrong, because if I now put 5 values, 5 characters, it still won't like it. So we put one more in, and that has worked. Okay. That should actually be 4. Okay. So what we have is we've got the length, open the brackets, and then the field name, which needed to be in the square brackets. Close the parenthesis, and we're saying it is greater than 4. Before I had 5, so we could have greater and equal to 5, and that would work too. Save that. Yep. Okay. Now it should allow, if I take one off, because I put greater or equal, and it's allowed that. Let's enter a value here so that that meets with the criteria. Okay, so finally today what I'm going to go over is the Lookup Wizard. It's one we haven't done. Go back into Design View, and we're going to use the Lookup Wizard on the sales table. And let's add sales status. And this time we're going to choose a Lookup Wizard, and we get the wizard to prompt us what we want. Now this, we don't actually have a table for the statuses at the moment, so I'm going to use the second option. I will type in the values I want, say next. Now here I make a list of the values I want to show as the options, which are pending, processing, put shipped, closed. Next. What label do we want for this? It's just the status label. I want to limit it to the list, so I don't want to allow users to enter any other information other than making a selection from the list provided. And I don't want them to allow multiple values. This is just going to be a one selection list. Save finish. If I save that now, put it into datasheet view. If we come over here now to the status, we have a combo box. And that is actually the multi-selection. I thought I'd turned that off. So let's check that. That is how the multiple selection window looks. Back into design view. And go to our lookup here. Over there you see allow multiple values. We want that to change to no. So here you can come and you can change once you've created a lookup. You can actually modify there. If you wanted to remove one of the statuses, you can just take one out. Always got to have the semicolon between each option, and you can even add on another option if you like. Okay, let's save that. Back to datasheet view. Yes. I don't get this. Can I not save that? It's not going to allow me to reverse it. Okay, let me just delete that column. Okay, so that to delete that, all I did was I just selected the column here and hit the delete key. So let's add this again. We use the Lookup Wizard. And closed. Limit to the list. Don't allow multiple values. And finish. Okay, so now we've got it as no. This is the information. That's what we want. And now we just have the list without the checkbox so that you can only select one option. Okay. Now this was with putting information in from that I typed in the list values, but in the case of the sales client, we actually want to pull that information from the client's table. So did we have some clients in? Yeah, we got a couple of clients in there. So let's now create this one based on this table. So we'll go into design view. The client. This is going to be the Lookup Wizard. This time we're going to use these option to select from another table. Saying yes. Next, select the clients. And what I'm going to select here is both the ID and the name, because the ID is the value that's going to be stored in the field, but the name is the value that I want the users to see, because obviously a numeric value to them doesn't mean anything. They're not going to know all the numbers, the IDs of all the customers. Next, we'll sort it by the client name ascending. And you'll see here we've got checked that to hide the key column, which is the ID. If we uncheck that, users will actually see this. They'll see both the client ID and the customer. We just want them to be able to see the customer. There's no need for them to see the ID. Next. Now, do we want to enable data integrity between the tables? This is always good to have because without data integrity, it can allow you to have records in your sales that are not actually linked to a customer. But because we're using a foreign key, we always want it to be linked to a customer. And this is now we've got the options cascade delete or restrict delete, and that is for deleting information. So say for example, if a customer is deleted from the client table and they have sales, if you have the cascade delete, it would also delete any sales that you have for them. In this case, we don't want to do that because then we're removing historical information of sales. We always want to keep those on record. So we would say restrict delete. And that means that it won't allow you to delete any customers that have got a sales. Obviously, if you've got a customer in the client table that you haven't yet created sales for, those can be deleted. But any with sales, it won't allow you to delete. Select finish. Save that. Why can't? Okay, the sales data violates integrity rules. Now the reason that is because I had a record that I'd created in the sales, but I haven't assigned a customer to that. So that's why it won't let me save this at this point. I just say okay. Let's put the information in there. I saved it, so let's go and put this in design view. And we've selected a customer. I think it was just, it's created it, but it was just telling us that there was a record there that didn't have the information. So now you can see when we come in and create a sale, we just select the customer and then enter the information. Okay. So let's leave it at that for today, and I look forward to meeting with you again next month, and we'll go further next month into looking at importing data from other sources such as Excel or text files, and we'll build up these database tables and get some data in there and make it look more meaningful. And so have a think about what you want to create, and then maybe then next month when we're starting, you can start creating your own database. And if you have any questions or queries about how to set it up, I can help you out with that. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening.